Hello, it's great to have you with us on Parenting in a Pandemic, and always a pleasure to have our resident parenting expert, Professor Matt Sanders, back with us again.
Nice to be here.
Now, Matt, today we are talking about something I think a lot of us can identify with, the bad and often unhealthy habits that we've adopted throughout this pandemic. I certainly can confess that I'm guilty to some of them.
Yeah, well, you know, we're talking about stress and disrupted routines for a lot of people, and that, you know, this makes it a particularly kind of risky time for people developing all sorts of ways of coping with stress and anxiety and boredom and so on. And sometimes we can be adopting practices and behaviours that are actually not good for our health in the long term.
Things that probably feel good at first but aren't good later on, and I can certainly rattle off a long list. But can you share with us some of the key areas where we mightn't be doing ourselves any favours?
Well, if you think about it, we're watching way more television and screen time than most people are used to. There's so much binge TV watching going on. It can create a situation where there's an over reliance on these activities, and they're associated then with you know, much more sedentary time, less movement. You know, people are playing games more often, and sometimes people are getting into a lot of things like gambling, and also really extensive use of social media. Other things that can be an issue is that just an increase in the level of snacking that's taking place when people are at home and they're bored and they're using food as a way of kind of making themselves feel a little better. You can become overly reliant on that, and of course be drinking way more caffeine and alcohol or cigarettes, and even taking medications and other drugs that are really not good for your physical health and well-being. So these are kind of risky times for developing some patterns of behaviour and habits that you might not want to keep.
Can you tell us about the signs we should be looking out for that they may be becoming a problem, these habits might be a problem?
Well, there's a couple of important signs, and that is that if you've recognised it's an issue and you've tried to change it and you haven't been able to, even with your best efforts, you know, that sometimes suggests that you've become overly reliant on something. You might need a little bit of extra strategy to turn things around. Another sign that things are not working out too well is if it's starting to affect your relationships. So you've got other people in your family who are drawing to your attention what you're doing and perhaps being critical of it. That means it's probably having a negative or adverse effect on your family relationships. One last thing is that if your practicing of these habits is actually interfering with your ability to do what you need to do to take care of your kids, to get yourself organised, to be able to do the things that are necessary in running your household and running your life, then that's a sure sign.
So, Matt, how do these unhelpful habits particularly impact on parents?
Well, one way it impacts on parents is that they become much more self-focused on doing these habits than interacting with your children. There's less supervision, they're less likely to detect when problems are occurring and being able to respond quickly to them, and it means their responses then are often more inconsistent or more delayed. Importantly, you're also providing a role model for your children about how to deal with stress and how to manage life in difficult times. So perhaps you're providing the very kind of model to your kids that you'd prefer not to.
Well, certainly having that extra glass of wine or that extra helping of chocolate can feel pretty good at the time, but it could be setting an unhealthy precedent. After the break, recognising what triggers a bad habit and, of course, the steps to break it. Welcome back. Well, as we've been discussing, bad habits can be all too easy to adopt, but luckily for us, there are some proven ways we can break free.
Yeah, it's really interesting, you know, that if you're developing a pattern of behaviour that you don't like and it's becoming a habit, there are some ways of trying to break it down into a series of steps that enable you to figure out how to actually break it. And the first of these steps is to try to do your best to identify what are the triggers for you for the starting of your habit, so that sometimes the triggers may be external, like you're in a particular place or with particular people or in particular situations that you know that's the set of circumstances that starts it all off. For example, many people are working from home and their office is set up in a dining room and where they're in sight of the fridge or the pantry. And it's so much easier when you're physically located very close to the fridge to make a little trip to the fridge for a snack more frequently than you might otherwise. The trick for managing these kind of external triggers is to make them less obvious. So for those whose desks face the fridge, turn it around the other way so it's not constantly looking at the fridge, or set it up in another room so the temptation is just simply less obvious and immediate in the environment. I sort of say out of sight, out of mind. It's kind of true, particularly when you've got a lot of time on your hands. And triggers, however, can also be internal. They can be things like your thoughts and feelings. So some unhelpful habits can be associated with efforts to avoid or manage unpleasant feelings. So you're feeling bored, you're feeling sad, you're feeling lonely, you're feeling stressed or anxious, and then the engaging in the habit alleviates that stress, even though it is often only temporary. If we act on autopilot without taking time to really listen to our emotions and our thoughts that are associated with them, we don't actually resolve the cause that's underlying why it's starting or the function it has for you. So if you feel the pull of a habit, just take a moment to listen to your emotions and to do something else to feel better instead of engaging in the habit. Now, it sounds so obvious and so simple, but sometimes it really is detecting it early and starting a competing activity like a physical activity, or to get in touch with someone to have a conversation, or to relocate to a different room or environment.
Is it worth, before you even get in the moment, to make a list of things that are healthier ways of feeling good, like, I don't know, going for a walk in nature or taking a bubble bath, and doing those things instead?
Yes, and you can do that sometimes when you're aware of a trigger getting ready to set you off to start the pattern of behaviour, but you can also sometimes do it to prevent it, so that you have the relaxing bath or whatever it is that you're doing at the very early stages, so that you're not getting right into the full habit pattern being played out.
Can you just dissect for us a little bit more about these habit patterns and how they work?
Just think about people who compulsively check their phone. You know,
I think that's most of us.
Yeah, they're just so frequent. If you think about the kind of disruption of it, you can perhaps turn off your phone, put it out of sight, log out of your social media accounts each time, so you actually make it more inconvenient for yourself to have to go through the ritual of doing this checking behaviour. Now, this won't stop you checking your phone, but it will definitely make the habit easier to break.
Just putting that little obstacle there. But what about when the outcome of a habit seems particularly appealing?
Well, that's often the short-term benefit, but it's really important, if you're trying to change habits, to focus in on reminding yourself of the delayed consequences of continuing, not the short-term reward, the long-term pain that you're going to endure by continuing this habit. Focusing on the long-term risks of continuing the habit is one way to really keep in focus that the short-term gain is something that is really contradicted by the long-term pain.
Well, this is fascinating stuff. And when we come back, the slippery slope of unhealthy eating and how to build better eating habits for the whole family.
Whose knives, whose forks?
Our forks are nice.
Thanks for your company. Well, Matt, eating well can be a challenge when we're busy and stressed, and those are actually two things that simultaneously parents have been dealing with during this pandemic.
I think for a lot of us it's been harder than many people had thought to keep healthy and to keep eating healthy food and ensuring we've got just healthy eating patterns and habits during the crisis. But you know, our role as parents is to not only tune into helping ourselves so that we are kind of operating the best we're able to, but we're constantly role models for our children, and we're teaching them and offering them a wide variety of foods throughout the day is really healthy for their nutrition and healthy development.
Well, to share some advice on that score, welcome to Judy Neen, who's a health nutrition expert from Health and Wellbeing Queensland. Great to have you with us, Judy.
It's lovely to be talking with you, Katrina.
Now, I know I've been cooking and preparing more meals than ever before during this time. It can be a real challenge. What tips can you share with us for teaching our kids about the value of healthy eating?
I'm a mum of 2 teenage boys, so it's definitely been a challenge. We've been all home together. I'm suddenly responsible for 3 meals a day instead of the usual one or 2 meals a day. And you focus, you want to do what's best for your kids. You want to look at trying to give them healthy food at the best times in the right amount. And it can be a real juggling act, particularly if you're juggling working commitments at the same time. My number one tip or piece of advice is to actually put some time in around your meal planning and involve your children in helping to plan for the days or week ahead, what you want to eat, what they're interested in, what are some of their favourite meals, and also look to get them involved in the kitchen and cooking alongside you. In the long term, if you can involve them and encourage them, get them enthusiastic about food and cooking, you're helping to set up their independence later in life. You're teaching them really valuable skills. And if kids are involved in the cooking of healthy meals, they're going to be more inclined to eat it and really enjoy it.
So Judy, I know all of us have been watching more screens during this time, and a few of us have snuck our meals onto the couch. Is that okay, or should we really be trying to eat at the table?
Oh, look, take this opportunity to eat at the table and connect together as a family. Really touch base with each other, check in on how you're going. And, a good rule that we follow in my family is no phones, no screens at the table. It's our time to connect and be together. It's special time.
I know when it comes to planning that weekly menu, sometimes I can draw a blank. What advice do you have for us, Judy, around what it is exactly that our children should be eating?
Look, my advice, go back and refer to the Australian Dietary Guidelines. It's based around the 5 food groups. So look to get as wide a range of foods as possible in your budget and in your circumstances, but look to include your meat, fish and alternatives, and your cheese and dairy foods, your grain foods and your breads, and of course not to forget fruit and vegetables. Also think through what snacks to have on hand in the house. You don't need to reach for the cakes and sweet types of food. Look first, in the first instance, try and get more fruit and vegetables as the snacks in between meals.
What about drinks, Judy? What should we keep in mind now that it's getting cooler? And is a little bit of soft drink okay?
Oh, look, only for very special occasions. No, ditch the soft drinks. You don't need soft drinks in the house. If you want to make up your own soda water, that's an option. Have water, get creative, add some fruit to it, chop it up, put some mint in it. So yes, definitely go for the water in place of the other cordials or soft drinks or juices.
You've given us so much great advice, Judy. Thank you so much. And I love how you've really encouraged us to, I guess, eat the rainbow of fruits and vegetables. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, after the break, more on how families can move forward from these challenging times into healthier habits. Welcome back. Well, Matt, Judy had some really great strategies there for building habits around healthy eating for families. Is that something that we can reflect on with regards to changing some other habits in family life?
I think we certainly can. The examples that we used around food and nutrition are important examples, but they're still examples of tackling an issue that you've identified yourself as a mum or dad that has become a pattern of behaviour or a habit that you would like to see turned around. And some of these ways are unhelpful, and they're understandable that people have developed them during these particularly challenging times, but it's good to think about how to make sure that they do not interfere with parenting in a way that really disrupts family life and makes it difficult for children. So it's a good time to be working on these healthy habits, if you like, as a family. So things like regular exercise, you can establish new patterns of behaviour and new habits. It's almost like a personal plan of change that you're thinking about. I mean, if you're worried about screen time, or you're worried about, you're having too many glasses of extra wine, if you're worried about those annoying, irritating arguments that you're getting into with your partner every day over, it seems like trivia, then just don't endure it, but turn it into a plan for change. It becomes a goal, and then you formulate a strategy. It takes a bit of effort, it takes a bit of self-control, but with planning, with good timing, with the right motivation, change is absolutely possible.
Well, it has certainly been a really challenging first half to 2020, but I really do take my hat off to all the parents and families who've taken this opportunity to become a lot closer and to change some things in their life and become more creative about how they deal with daily life. Matt, I can't thank you enough for guiding us through these very strange times and giving us so much advice, from everything from anxiety to sleep to sibling rivalry. Can you please share some final words for us as we look towards the future?
Look, it's been my pleasure to be part of this, and I felt it's been really important that during this time we've had the opportunity to really reflect on our parenting. And look, there's one thing that is really important in your parenting journey, and I describe it as a journey because you never stop learning and you're always a parent for life. And the thing is that if you truly value that parenting experience, you will give it the kind of priority it deserves in your life. And when good parenting becomes a priority for you, do you know who benefits? Absolutely everyone. Children benefit, you personally benefit because you feel as though you're doing the best job you're able to. And remember, there's no gold medals for martyrdom in parenthood, and there is no single quick fix. You're constantly learning, constantly needing to change and adjust. And the thing that I would like to just really encourage mums and dads out there to do is to just recognise that good parenting is the clean water of children's mental health and well-being. This is not about preaching to people about how to raise their kids. You will know by selecting for yourself those things that make sense to you and then turning it into a plan of action and actually implementing it, reviewing it, reflecting on it. Is it working? If it's not working, you change, you adjust. And when you start to do that, there's an incredible sense of personal empowerment as a parent, that you feel as though you're really working out how to do this thing, which everyone is telling you is complex, is difficult, is demanding, but It is so rewarding, and it's the single most important thing in determining the well-being of children and our community.
And there are two things that for me have really stood out throughout these episodes. The first is the importance of routine and consistency. The second, which I've loved, is about being kind to yourself as a parent.
Well, how can you be consistent and have good routines in your family life if your own personal world is one of chaos? Taking care of yourself is an enabler. It enables you to do the more positive parenting strategies much, much more easily, because when you're feeling secure, supported, loved, you have a break from kids, and that you've got the knowledge, skills and patience to relate to your kids well, parenting is not so much a breeze because it's always challenging, but you've got a very powerful toolkit that you can use and apply to many, many challenges that you'll face in raising your children.
Matt, what a wonderful way to end. Thank you so much for all of your advice throughout this series.
Thank you, Katrina. It's been an honour to be part of it.
And before we go, a reminder that you can catch up on all of the episodes anytime via 7plus. There are so many great resources to choose from, and you'll discover plenty also online to help you with your parenting journey, courtesy of the Parenting and Family Support Centre. Thank you so much for your company. Until we see each other again, stay safe and stay well.